Hi, everyone. I'm Zach Seward, co-founder and CEO of Quartz, and welcome to Make Business Better, where today we'll be talking about the state of paid employee leave and what leaders can do to help support their employees' financial resilience, that is. Every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I meet here on LinkedIn to talk with business leaders who are committed to making business better in their work and willing to come on and share some practical tips with all of us to apply in our own lives and jobs. In the next 15 minutes, we'll give you the Quartz essentials on what access to paid leave currently looks like here in the US and what it could look like in the future. Insight from someone who has studied this topic quite a bit, Jamie Kalamarides, the president of Prudential Insurance Group, who will join us shortly, and advice for addressing some of the systemic barriers to economic equality and practical tips for supporting financial wellness of your teams at work. We'll take viewer questions too if you've got any, so place them in the chat and we'll get to as many as you can. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started with the Quartz essentials. So there been a number of surveys. We pulled out some stats from showing that the United States, as is frequently noted, it falls well behind other countries in access to paid types of leave. As a survey on the left showed, access to some amount of sick leave is fairly common, with 70 some odd percent of workers reporting having access to some amount of sick leave. But parental and family leave, as well as medical leave, remain far behind in terms of access. Not only that, it's higher earning workers in the US who are much, much more likely to have access to these kinds of paid leaves through their employers in the first place. But if we turn to the next slide, what we also see in a study that Prudential recently did is that paid family leave is among the top most desired benefits among employees, and what employees say is key to their own financial resilience. Obviously, the last year and the recession and other financial challenges that the pandemic has wrought has really put this issue, I think, into focus. And we wanted to take some time in this episode to talk about it in more depth, which we'll do now by bringing in our guest, Jamie Kalamarides. Jamie is the president of the Prudential Group Insurance, a business unit of Prudential Financial. He speaks and writes frequently on the role of employers in supporting financial wellness and the critical need for a broad and constant paid family and medical leave solution for American workers. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Zach. Really glad to be here.
So we've been, throughout the pandemic, having opportunity to get a little bit of an insight into people's home lives, as we're still a lot of us working from home instead of the office. So I tend, before we get into the questions about the topic at hand, to ask our guests to just share something about the environment they're working in. And I mean, I sometimes make a choice, but I'm going to have to ask you to talk about the portrait hanging over your right shoulder for just a moment.
Yeah, I'm in an attic room because this is what I need to convert to an office. And over my right shoulder is a picture of a great-great-great-grandfather from my Irish side of my family. And he lived in upstate New York, and he provided for his family. He had a farm. He worked on the Erie Canal, and he created generational wealth that transferred down through that family. And I've been very fortunate on that side. But he's not the interesting guy. The interesting guy is actually my great-grandfather on the Greek side, which I don't have a portrait of. He and his brothers came over in the 1900s, and some of the first Greek immigrants to New York City, and founded St. Nicholas Church, the church that was destroyed by 9/11 and is being rebuilt in New York City now as a national shrine to St. Nicholas. And I'm sort of indebted by his focus on his faith. And that really inspires me to think about how do we create a just and socially equitable economy, but do it in a way that is sustainable for business.
Well, let's use that to jump right into today's topic. Why is paid leave a topic that you and more importantly Prudential have taken on as such an issue?
Yeah, well, as you said, we're all sort of living in this pandemic environment. And certainly people were economically stressed before going into the pandemic. But now we realize that 7 in 10 people feel economic stress. And the pandemic has even exposed the challenges even more, specifically for businesses and workers who are forced to choose between going to work while they're sick or having a family member be sick or staying home and risk losing their job and their income and going into financial destitution because they don't have enough emergency savings. Now, there's always been a moral case for paid leave. And as you said, large employers and wealthier, more affluent individuals have it. But we're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have a national paid leave program. And because of that, we're finding millions of Americans are really stressing in this pandemic environment between doing the right things for their family and having economic security.
There was a bit of a breakthrough last year in response to the pandemic. Congress passed a mandatory paid leave for small business employees, but that expired at the end of 2020, I believe. What was your assessment of that program? Is there anything we could learn from that? Is it something that ought to be made permanent in your view?
Yeah, so right now, there are 3 different ways individuals can get access to paid leave. There are about 8 states that mandate paid leave: Massachusetts, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, California, Washington. There are a couple others that I'm forgetting. And that's for everybody. Large and medium-sized employers offer it in cases, but small employers really weren't. So the Congress decided to mandate it for employers with less than 500 employees. And they repaid those employers through tax credits so that they were financially whole. The challenge is it wasn't well publicized, and workers were afraid of retribution in it. So we needed to do more in terms of making people aware of it and how to go about applying for it and then actually using it. We found that in the last year, about 20% of individuals who had access used it. We suspect that number should have been about double that. About 40% probably should have used it. And so the challenge is how do we go from this patchwork of solutions, some employers, some states, a federal program that expired, to a national program that's comprehensive and that works for all businesses, small businesses, large businesses, medium businesses as well, and really covers all employers.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the U.S. has essentially a public-private partnership when it comes to leave policies and is leaning very heavily on generosity of employers to treat paid medical leave, paid parental leave as like a perk as opposed to a right. And that's how we got into this situation where it's so disparate in terms of access to these leaves being so much more common among higher paid workers.
Yeah, I should point out that we should probably define some terms here.
Sure.
Sick leave is that benefit that allows you, when you're sick, to take a certain number of days. And then after that, it's on your own. Parental leave is commonly defined as paternity and maternity leave. That is, I have a new child or I've adopted a child and I'm going to be out for a while I'm bonding with that child and taking care of them. And then paid family and sick leave covers both of those items, but also allows people to be caregivers. And why is that important? Because there's millions of caregivers for the long term, but we need families to be able to, and individuals to be able to take time to take care of themselves if they're sick or if their loved one is sick for a short period of time and still get access to pay. And it's not just on employers' dime that should be doing this. Employees should be contributing as well, just as they do to their 401k or their health insurance. There's got to be a business case for employers to be willing to do this. And in fact, I would say there is. And the pandemic has shown it. You don't want individuals who are sick coming to work and infecting the rest of your workers. You don't want individuals who have a family member who is sick coming to work. You want them to stay home, get well, and come back when they're ready. And we have found that when individuals have access to that sort of program, they actually are present at work more often, and they're more productive at work because they're not worried about the financial stress or the caregiving. It is a clear business case for the CFO to put paid family leave in.
Why would you say, if it's that clear cut, just from a financial selfish perspective of companies, why would you say that so many companies still lag in implementing sufficiently generous leave policies?
Yeah, because small businesses lack purchasing power. Right now, if they want, they could do it as a pay-as-you-go sort of method or have employees contribute. But if they want to buy insurance to make sure that they're protected against pandemics, for instance, or unexpected high rates of occurrence, they need to be in a bigger pool. And interestingly, we've just seen an example of this pass Congress in a bipartisan way in the Secure Act. The Secure Act has allowed small businesses to pool their purchasing power to offer common retirement plans, multiple employer plans, or pooled employer plans, they're called. And that law can be expanded to allow other benefits to be able to be pooled as well, including paid family leave. That's what we're looking for in terms of a national public-private partnership to really be moving forward and make this affordable for everybody.
Let's dig in there a little bit more then. What, in your view, does an ideal version of that public-private partnership look like? How much is being mandated by the U.S. government, and if so, what is the role of employers there to support it?
Yeah, I think we can look to retirement plans and the solutions that are there. It makes a lot of sense that everybody has access to this. Every worker could have access to that. And to do that, you have to have a federal solution, a federal backstop. Right now, the Democrats are offering the Family Act, which suggests that the Social Security Administration would run it. The Republicans tend to offer tax credits, which are helpful, but don't necessarily offer the employer assistance and the employee assistance in getting back to work. I think a solution has to be a combination of the Family Act and tax credits, plus private solutions that offer vocational and rehabilitation and a connection of the employee to the employer and communicating back and forth when the employee is planning on returning. What we can imagine is that the federal government might mandate this for all employer sizes and give tax credits back to employers, especially small ones that need the help in operating and running this. They would probably also give tax credits to individual entrepreneurs and somehow or another subsidize that process for sole proprietors and gig workers, providing opportunities to be able to do that more effectively. It's got to be a combination, sort of the best of all of these techniques: private employers, what's being offered at the states and the experiments that are going on there, and a federal solution.
That makes sense and as a small business owner myself now, makes a lot of sense, and a lot of those challenges certainly resonate with me. You talked about some of the work that Prudential's done surveying Americans about what you call financial resilience, and you had a quote in another interview I thought was evocative of the current situation, that COVID sort of come through and exposed rocks underneath at the base of the river that were the real underlying causes of financial problems and weaknesses that then the pandemic just exacerbated. Could you talk more about that financial stress and how Americans experience it? And then, I'd like to come back around to some of these solutions that could help address it.
Yeah, so Americans are underneath financial stress. 50% of Americans don't have 3 months worth of emergency savings to survive at the poverty level. And that's a rather scary fact. And it's much, much worse for people of color. For instance, the wealth gap between Black families and white families is 10 times. For every dollar a white family has, a Black family has 10 cents. It's 7 times for Latino families. And it is half for women compared to men. when they're just leading single parent families. And the challenge with this is we've got systemic barriers in our economy that are preventing people from reaching the middle class. And that's a real threat to our democracy. When you have whole groups of people that have systemic barriers to reaching the middle class, we are threatening our economy, we're threatening the growth of our country, and we're creating an environment between haves and have-nots. So addressing financial wellness and financial resiliency is a key element. It's not the only one, but it's a key element to make sure that we have a thriving economy and a stable country and a stable democracy moving forward.
No disagreement from here on all those points, but maybe to hammer home the topic of the day, why is it you focus on robust paid sick leave for employees as a key way to address the much broader the systemic issues you were just describing?
Yeah, because families can't self-insure against some of these risks. They can't self-insure against someone getting sick in the pandemic. Certainly they have health insurance to pay the health bills, but you need to have ongoing income to be able to pay the rent and the food and the car bill along the way. And if you're sick as the primary breadwinner, then how do you keep providing for your family? And unless you have emergency savings, which we just talked about, most of the country doesn't have emergency savings, you need an institution like paid family leave to cover paternity, maternity, to cover when you're sick, to cover when you have to be the caregiver for a few weeks for a loved one. Now, there are other important solutions like putting in place institutional emergency savings, making sure people have access to retirement plans and healthcare. But paid family leave is one of those foundational benefits that all workers should have access to.
Here's hoping that Congress and the new administration can figure something out that is more permanent than the 2020 solution, and perhaps more resilient as well. Jamie, thank you so much for joining and sharing all those studies and thoughts.
My pleasure, Zach. It's been a real great time talking about this.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. And thanks to all of you for joining us. That's it for today's episode of Make Business Better. I'll see you right here back on next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for our next show. Please join us then. I'll see you then as well. Bye.